Norway chess started today, but before I let you know what happened in round one, I want to tell you about a sale that's taking place on chessbase.com. For 24 hours, there's 25% off all DVDs and downloads and other software. So if you're interested in getting something from my PowerPlay series, then now is the time. You'll see the link in the description above. Okay. Enough of that. Let's see what happened in round one of Norway chess. So we had a very exciting first round pairing of Magnus Carlsen against Fabiano Caruana. So a little taste perhaps of their World Championship match in November. Carlsen with the white pieces opened with e4, and now to avoid anything with the Petrov, he played bishop c4, the bishop's opening. Well, not the most challenging, and we're going to see why in a second, but quite respectable and typical of these little sidelines that Carlsen likes to play to avoid his opponent's preparation. And Caruana plays the approved method of equalizing against this, c6, and you get in d5 straight away. So this has been played many times before, and now this clever check, bishop b4. So it means, well, it's slightly awkward. If c3, then the bishop is just going to drop back to d6, and the c3 square is taken away from the knight. That's the point. So there's less pressure on the d5 pawn. And Carlsen and Caruana actually have played this. There was a very interesting game they played in St. Louis in 2014. Again, Carlsen with the white pieces. That went like that. Crazy game, but Caruana actually ended up winning that one. This time, Carlsen played bishop d2. This is the approved move. But of course, it benefits black to trade pieces at this stage in the opening. It just reduces the tension in the position. Caruana himself has played queen takes d2 here, but it doesn't really change the assessment of the position. Well, as Carlsen said after the game, white is not pretending to play for too much here. But it's a solid system, and we've seen Magnus play with this pawn structure on so many occasions, usually through the Spanish, but sometimes the Giocopiano as well. And the normal move for black in this position is just to play knight e7. But a5 from Caruana, well, trying to get some kind of concession out of white, so obviously looking to trap the bishop. And I suppose if a4 blocking that, then it could be a little bit awkward later on if the knight manages to come to c5, and then, well, you want to save the bishop, but then the a pawn could be vulnerable. I guess that's one of the ideas of a5, that is. But Carlsen simply played c3, which looks very sensible to me, just preventing black from playing a4, because obviously the bishop is on now. So knight d7. And here one could castle, but, well, fairly soon black may just take on e4 and try to equalize the position. So Carlsen played in quite an interesting way, actually. He exchanged on d5, giving up the center, but in this position it's just slightly awkward for black with the knight here. You really want your knight on c6, and then black would be more than fine, I think. But with the knight on d7 makes it a little bit awkward for the bishop on c8, and there is some pressure on the centre pawns as well. So let's see how this works out in practice. So rook e1 threatens the pawn on e5. Therefore rook e8, defending. Now knight f1, so the knight switches round. Might come to e3, might come to g3. Just depends how black plays. Now Carlsen thought after the game that probably b6 was the most prudent move for black here. But instead Caruana lashed out with b5, and this gives white quite an interesting possibility to play a4, and so this breaks up black's pawns. I mean, black doesn't really want to play that isolated pawn here, and there's certainly more pressure on black's centre. So after a4, b4, but now the structure is, well, different. Black still has this centre, but this is an isolated pawn. You never know, it could be attacked. And also white has managed to get a passed a pawn, and although it can't advance at the moment, it looks kind of nice, particularly, you know, with the bishop sitting here blockading the b pawn. But the question is, how is Carlsen going to deal with this pawn centre? So let's have a look. Knight e3, attacking it, and white would very much like to see this, and then the knight comes to a beautiful square, attacking e5. So therefore bishop b7 covering the d5 pawn. And now Carlsen makes a big decision. He plays d4. It's a logical move because you want to keep the d pawn blockaded, and that means bishop on b7 isn't very well placed. Of course, black never wants to play something like this that will just give white a beautiful blockading square. So e4 looks pretty nice, and if the knight drops back, then let's say queen b6, and this isolated pawn could come under a bit of fire after this. That's a bit irritating. But that wasn't in Carlsen's mind at all. He played knight e5. And this is such a typical Carlsen pawn sacrifice. But this is actually a key moment in the game, because Carlsen said he was expecting Caruana to sacrifice the exchange. And this is probably a reasonable practical try for black. Threat to play d4. So white pushes the knight back. I should repeat, this did not happen in the game, but this was what Carlsen was thinking might happen. And then, of course, the pawn advances again. This is absolutely vital for black to push these pawns forward if you sack the exchange. Now white has a big choice here, whether you go to c4, f5, even back to f1 and bouncing around here. But black always has compensation with these two pawns. I mean, white is still fine here, but obviously you have to try and control these pawns. But Caruana rejected this. In some ways I understand it, because although these pawns look very impressive, white's pieces are very well coordinated, and the bishop points at f7, slightly weak spot. And I think in practical terms, it's not that easy to hold together black's centre. The computer thinks this is okay for black, I should say, but you have to tread carefully. But instead of that, quite quickly, Caruana simply took the pawn off, the offered pawn, and queen d4. So why has Carlsen given up this pawn? Well, it means he has tremendous blockading square for the queen. The knight also stands well, and the bishop. The rooks are connected. On a good day it'd be nice to advance this pawn, but we're not there yet. This bishop isn't very well placed on b7. Carlsen was wondering whether he was really better here or whether this was just a comfortable position. It's certainly very comfortable. I mean, one thing is, it's very important that the queen isn't removed from this beautiful blockading square. Rook c1 looks good to occupy the open file. Now rook d7, so that's making sure that this queen isn't going to move. I mean, for example, if queen takes b4, then Well, material is now even, but suddenly with these pawns side by side, steaming down the board doesn't look very attractive. So white just has to be careful of that. But it's really not clear what, well, either side is doing here actually. But typically, for a Carlsen pawn sacrifice, it's much easier for white to play this position than black. There are lots of ways you can think of how white can make just tiny improvements in his position. Not so easy for black. So rook a5 looks reasonable to trade this active piece, active rook. And here, once again, if that pawn is taken, then black suddenly is in the driving seat here. So Carlsen just keeps control. He exchanges. And then little move, just improving his position, h3. Just giving his king an escape square. And, well, just waiting to see how black plays, actually. King h7 from Caruana. And rook c1. And this is a crunch position. Black is running very short of moves. And yeah, it's really not easy to see what you do. For example, if the king goes back, then let's play rook c5. Then that looks a bit awkward. This pawn could advance. Sometimes it's even possible to take here. Maybe the rook will come here and take on b4. That's another idea. If the queen goes back to d8, then it might be nice to reroute this bishop. Put the bishop here and perhaps b3, and maybe sometimes bishop b5 could be interesting. Maybe the bishop shoots out to g4 sometimes. Queen a6 is possible, and sometimes the queen can just nip down to e2 and make a bit of a nuisance of itself, and this looks like the best way to play. But certainly not an easy move to see. Instead, Caruana played rook c7. After the game, Carlsen said, "This is insane." Wow, strong words. Well, what happened? Carlsen exchanged, and then he took on b4. So material is now even, but in taking this pawn, now there's nothing on d4. Basically d4 will just be taken, so it's pretty safe. I guess Caruana was hoping that this activity would pull him through. Check with queen c1. Now Carlsen was debating whether he should play bishop d1 or king h2 here. If king h2, he was concerned about this, and he thought this would be a draw, actually, after knight takes d5 and knight g4. Well, that is a draw. After this, it's perpetual check. And check on e1. But actually, as Carlsen discussed with the commentators afterwards, it seems that queen b6 keeps hold of the knights, keeps the blockade, and this looks, with care, to be winning for white. In any case, I mean, king h2 is a good move, but bishop d1, the move that Carlsen played in the game, is also a good move. And the queen comes back to blockade, and now these pawns are ready to roll. So this is the difference between the two positions. Mobile queenside pawns and black's pawns in the centre are blockaded. Now Caruana is doing his best to thrash around here, but it's very difficult when this knight is so poorly placed. Actually, you can see it would like to move somewhere more active, but I'm afraid pawns just stand in its way. So this is the game continuation. Caruana just trying to stay active here. And b4, so the pawns starting to roll, and Caruana felt that this was his only active chance to play e3. So obviously if queen takes, then queen takes knight. So pawn takes pawn, and now knight e4. So at the cost of a pawn, he's managed to activate, and now he's looking to play moves like, for example, knight d2. But with care, Carlsen is doing okay here. Well, more than okay. That's goes without saying. He's now 2 pawns up. It's an understatement. Attacking the knight. Now, if knight c3, then we have a check here. It's important. And picking up the knight. So knight d2. Now it gets a little bit tricky, but Carlsen took his time here. He gave a check and put the queen on g4, just defending the knight. f5, trying to distract the queen away so the queen comes back. Knight e4, watch out for knight c3, but queen e1, excellent move. So that basically covers the knight squares. You can see that by the queen. And also the queen defends the b pawn as well. So it looks a little bit awkward for a moment, but actually there is nothing that black can do here to upset this. And these pawns are just rolling on. So the knight had to come back to stop the b pawn. And little by little, Carlsen now emerges. Still a pin. Still got to be careful. Knight d2 coming, so therefore the king comes over. And if knight d2 check, then actually this holds everything together. There's no problem there at all. So therefore, Caruana thought that the best he could do was to grab one of the pawns back and to go into a queen and pawn endgame. This should be winning for white, but still a little bit tricky. Queen and pawn endgames are difficult to play, particularly as is very often the case at the end of a long game, because there are so many possibilities to consider, and you always have to watch out for tricks with perpetuals and sometimes even stalemates as well. But Carlsen played very practically. So first of all, he stations his queen in the middle, preventing f3. Usually a very good rule of thumb in queen and pawn endgames is to centralize your queen. Just takes lots of squares from your opponent. Now, Carlsen said after the game that he felt his technique wasn't very good, but he played without any risk, and yeah, very securely actually. He just didn't give Caruana any chance at all. Still 2 pawns up. The queen holds the pawn here, and now just threatens to advance the h pawn. Remember, a queen trade is just going to be good for white, or winning, of course. Queen d6, still Caruana trying to find tricks. Now, Carlsen had to get to the time control at move 60, so he just repeated moves once and then pushed on. It needs a little bit of calculation. So f3 check, and now g3, but this pawn actually isn't dangerous at all. So the threat is to trade queens, completely winning endgame. So f2, queen g6 again. So if that's taken, that's check, that's very important. Then king g2, and the pawn rolls through. So after queen g6 check, king h8. And Caruana got a new queen. Okay, now 3 pawns up. Okay, I don't think we really need to spend too much time examining these moves. Carlsen played very, very carefully, just kept everything protected, made sure that really black's checks were never going to cause the king too much trouble. The king can always hide here. just played very securely, just yeah, with a flat back four basically. Didn't give Caruana any hope at all in this position. So this is, we're at move 75 now. And finally Caruana gave up here. There's going to be a check and then a new queen here. I don't blame Caruana for playing on at all. It's perfectly within, not only within his right, but I think it's very important that he sends a message to Carlsen that it's never going to be easy to force a win. You always got to put up the best defense possible. And indeed, Carlsen said after the game, absolutely, if he were in, he would do the same in Caruana's position. And he also admitted, I was nervous. I didn't want to screw up. Beautifully put. Well, as Carlsen said, also he said, it's a confidence builder for me. I haven't won the first round in ages. Well, that's true. Carlsen often gets off to a slow start, so big bonus for him. In fact, that was the only decisive game in the first round. Other games, all the other games were drawn. But yeah, very nice for Magnus to start with a win against Fabiano. More Norway chess coming your way soon. Do check out the playlists above. And of course, just to mention again that there's sale at chessbase.com. Check out the link above. 25% off for 24 hours. PowerPlay DVDs are all yours at a huge discount. Thanks for watching.